Well, I'm going to start this morning by asking you what might seem like an odd question. So I invite you to think about, why I might be asking this question. The question is, have you ever put your shirt on inside out? Or maybe your socks? Put any piece of clothing inside out? And maybe someone noticed and told you, and you were very surprised that you'd done that, and had some kind of an excuse like, oh, I got dressed in the dark this morning. Or maybe you noticed someone else's shirt or clothing was inside out, and did you tell them, or did you just go about your business? Just maybe you actually intentionally put your clothes inside out on purpose, for whatever reason you chose. Because doing some things inside out can be a great opportunity, a great experience. In fact, it's actually good to purposely work from the inside out. In fact, that's the way life works best, from the inside out. And when we live from the inside out, the outside in looks pretty darn good. Yes? When we live from the inside out, our outside looks very promising and it looks plentiful. It looks like what we just talked about as we experienced the meditation this morning, love. I bet that felt good, yes? And sometimes I know it actually brings me to tears to get to that point where I actually am solidly believing that I am love, despite if I don't sing at the same time that my professional husband does, despite if I say a word wrong or say something that then in hindsight I'm like, oh gosh, did I offend you? I hope not, because I didn't mean to, or that wasn't the way I meant it. We all do those things. It's called being human. But getting to the point where we absolutely know and trust, I am love, I am that, can be very humbling. Ernest Holmes wrote, we are in an infinite mind, and infinite mind is also in us. It is by this mind that we think. Our title this morning is Your Invisible Power, and it's written by, it's being given based on the small book that Ernest Holmes wrote, Your Invisible Power, which if you haven't read, I invite you to. If you have read, I invite you to read it again. It is so powerfully moving. So he actually said that he believed that this work of his was his greatest work in this teaching. And so that tells us something, because I love all of his writings. And I will admit that there are some times that I read a paragraph or a page that I'm like, well, I don't think that was for me. I didn't really understand too much of that. But I know if I read it again sometime later, it will fit with me in that moment. Because there are often times that I will read a book that he wrote, and I'll say to David, do you ever remember hearing him say this? But I know I've read the book, so I had to have read that. But it just didn't stick in that moment. So stick-to-itiveness is a really important part of using our invisible power. In the book, Your Invisible Power, Ernest Holmes writes about being rightly understood and properly used, this power that we have, rightly understood and purposefully used. He says, the God that is within you is truth, beauty, harmony, and wholeness. Every apparent imperfection from which you suffer is the result of ignorance, because ignorance of the law excuses no one from its effects. It follows that the very power which has bound you, rightly understood and properly used, will produce freedom. And I don't know about you, but in this human experience, I am always wanting to level up, higher up in my mind, learn how to go even more within so that I'm living from the inside out. There's a story about a yogi and the yogi's disciple. They are both man. If you were here last week, you know I talked about man and woman. And they are both men, the yogi and the disciple, and they find themselves in a city. And the disciple is thinking, well, we're probably going to have to beg for food and sleep in the park, I guess, tonight because we have no money. And so he mentions this to the yogi, and the yogi says, no, we are going to sleep in a hotel and we're going to eat at that same hotel. And the disciple says, well, how can this possibly occur? We have no money. And the yogi says, come with me. And he takes them to a grassy area and he says, sit down and I want you to meditate. Concentrate, focus your mental abilities, and visualize. And so they sit there for a while, and of course the yogi is doing exactly what he has directed the disciple to do. And after a while he stands up, and the disciple stands up and follows him, and the yogi walks to a hotel. He enters, and a man dressed in a suit comes over to him and he says, oh, you look like traveling swamis. Would you like to work in the kitchen for a room tonight and food for dinner? And the yogi says, yes, thank you, we would. And the manager walks away, and the disciple says, how did you do that? Is that magical? And the yogi says, it absolutely is not magical. It's focus and visualize. Mental focus and visualization of that which you desire. In your own self, within yourself, not seeing other people but yourself, and knowing what is happening for you. And the yogi says the power of the thought works through mental concentration and belief. So let's dig a little deeper into understanding how each of our invisible power works, and how we too can learn to live from the inside out.
Well, I've read this book several times actually, and you can read it in a day or so. I mean, it's not that long, in a few hours, if you have no interruptions. But
that would be me.
But it takes me a little bit long. I hesitate to say that because quite often I start reading and then I sit and ponder for a little bit and think about that for a while before I can go on. So sometimes I can read a book in a few hours, sometimes it will take me a few days, depending how deeply I get into it. But every time, I agree that every time I read this book, it gives me more and more. So I don't not only invite you to read it, I encourage you to read it. It's really quite powerful. And we have some copies here somewhere. If you would like to read it, I'll find it for you. I'm going to read several quotes from the book today. And Ernest Holmes says, the life within you is God. Whatever is true of God is true of your life, since your life and the life of God are not two, but one. Basically, that's what the yogi was talking about. We are connected with an energy source bigger than we are. And not only are we connected to it, we are it. If God is all that is, and I am, then God is all that I am, and so therefore I am one with all that God is. It's that simple. It's a mathematical proposition, but it's a simple truth. If God is all that is, then I am one with that too. In the book, he talks about different topics around this idea, and one of those is peace. We can substitute the word peace for power as well, if you wish. He says, the peace that is within you is not something separate from God. It's not something that bombards you from without. The peace is something that expands from within. Always this peace has been in you. Always this peace has nestled at the center of your being, ready to reveal its perfection and harmony. Peace stands at the door of your consciousness and awaits your acceptance of it. However, it does not stand outside your door, waiting for entrance, so much as it stands inside waiting to be expressed in everything you do. I love that idea that peace or power is something that expands from within. Do you ever feel their heart kind of swell? You read something or you experience something, your heart kind of, oh, that is so amazing. And it's a realization within you, not something that comes from without. And you think, wow, I think I already knew this. I think I am reawakening to something that was already in my awareness to start with. We quite often forget that we are connected. We are one with universal energy, universal power, universal peace. We are one with it. It is all that we are. You know that statement, I am that I am. Follow those words with a blank. And so it is. I am whatever I claim to be, because I am one with all that is. Jesus said, I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. The power is within us, and it is God moving through us and expressing as us into the world. Quite simple, but how often do we think about that? How often are we the yogi's student rather than the yogi? When do we quite often see ourselves as limited and separate from all of our good, and not knowing how we're going to be able to attain that because we have simply forgotten who we really are? We don't really remember our own divinity. Ernest Holmes says, the universal I am is also the individual I. The highest God and the innermost God is one God. To know this is to know the truth, which makes you free. All that God is, I am. There's no limits, no limitation and no separation. I am all power. I am all wisdom and knowledge and intelligence. I have access to because I am it. He says the illusion which you suffer and the grief you bear are not because you are separated from God, but because you do not realize that you are forever united with God. For God is at the center of your being, and being at the center of your being, and being that which you are, God is forever personifying itself in you. You are never separated from God because you do not realize, the reason you're going through these issues, because you do not realize that you are forever united with God. What you think about, you bring about, because you are a part of the power system. So therefore, every thought that you hold and place in a belief materializes in your life. So if you're suffering or going through grief, because that's what you're holding in your mind. The power is always there, and you are always using it, whether you are aware of it or not. That's just how life works. So if bad stuff is happening in your life, it's because you're using the power. And if good stuff is happening in your life, it's because you're using the power. You have the power. You have power to change your thinking, therefore change your life. You've heard that phrase before? It's not something you turn off or on when you need it, because you're always plugged into it, because you are it. There's no separate cord that plugs into something else and suddenly your prayers are answered. Your prayers are answered because you are the answer to your own prayers in your own consciousness. It's quite simple, isn't it? It's impossible to be separated from God. I had this idea, and we talked last week too about the drop in the ocean. And we are one drop in the ocean of life, the ocean of all that is. And I had this thought, we are like one star in the heavens. If you had a thought that you could capture one star and own it, where would you put it? You wouldn't put it in the what do you call that place down the street where you put all your stuff in a little garage? Wouldn't quite fit, I don't think. Storage, yeah. You won't put it in a storage place because there's no place big enough really to hold it, is there? So you grab the star, you're holding on to the star, and it's all yours. It's yours because you claimed it. but it really kind of encumbers your life, because what are you going to do with it? Where are you going to put it that's not in God? Because the storage compartment, even, that's God. I'm going to put it in my closet at home, that's God. Where am I going to put it? I might as well just leave it where it is and enjoy it as it is, as mine already, because that's the nature of who I am and what I am.
I like that. Catch a falling star, right?
Just put it in your pocket.
Maybe he could sing that one sometime, huh? I think you did once.
Oh, I did. I think I did.
So I love that you talked about using the word peace instead of power, because we are each in a different place in our lives, and so each of us is looking to make shifts in different areas. It could be physical body, it could be finances, it could be relationships, friendships, work, whatever it is. It could be anything in life that we're bumping up against. And insides of mind, all those words that are God are all one. And the only reason that we have words and that we sometimes understand what someone else is talking about is because we have these words that we've agreed upon what the meaning or the approximate meaning is. So I have another one that that Ernest Holmes writes about in this book, and it's our silent partner. I really like that one because I really like to know that when I go within, there's somebody else there that's really wise, divine intelligence. I like to know that I have that at my back, so that if I don't sing at the right time, I can be okay with it because God has my back. And so we think of God as being our silent partner, as us being in partnership with God, God being power, peace, or whatever it is that's on your plate. Perfect health, wholeness, abundance. We don't have to do anything to jumpstart this power because it's eternal, it's infinite, it's ever present. The only thing that isn't always present is our attention to it, right? And that's a part of thinking rightly. The power is eternal, and it is a part of us. So when we're operating from the inside out, it means we are capturing our innermost thought of this invisible God power, embracing it joyously, and allowing it to flow outward. One of the tools that we use in Science of Mind is visioning, and we have given classes on visioning in the past, and I'm going to give you a little mini class right now if you're not familiar with visioning. Visioning is different from meditation in that you're not just going into the silence. You're going into the silence purposefully asking a few questions, and those questions are, what is God or life or whatever word you want to use, what is life's highest vision for me, of me? What is life's highest vision for me? And then after you receive answers to that question, you ask, what must I accept? What must I accept in order to be this highest vision, in order to live this highest vision? And then what must I release? What must I release in my life to experience God's highest vision for me? And then, is there more? Those are the general questions that you would ask yourself. What is God's highest vision? What must I accept? What must I release? And is there more that hasn't come up yet? Folks, I want you to know that sometimes we all use this power in a destructive manner. And if we can catch ourselves, we can turn that around to think rightly. When we are using this power destructively for ourselves, we might notice that we're saying things that we would never accept someone else saying about us. We're engaging in self-talk that is telling us that we're less than. And this power within says, okay, you didn't really want it. So don't claim it. What we want to claim is the ability to live in loving kindness all the time, and that includes loving kindness to self. Ernest Holmes wrote, God is always God. No matter what our emotional storm or what our objective situation may be, there is always a something hidden in the inner being that has never been violated. At the core of our being, at the center of who we are and what we are purity. We are whole already. I'm not going to say this name right either if you are familiar with it, but it's something like Patanjali. You want to say it? Oh, it sounds good to you. Well, thank you. He wrote, when you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bonds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction, and you find yourself in a new, great, and wonderful world. So you know, a life that is worth living is a journey of growth. That growth occurs as we become that which we already are, that which we are here to experience. Living from the inside out is making good use of our invisible power by capturing God's highest vision for us and leaning into our own personal divine magnificence. And so it is.